All right. So we'll just jump right in with my opening comments. That for me is a kind of boils the whole film down to 1 minute. You know, when I was visiting friends in the Hamptons many years ago, one of my friends is from there, and he said, you know, when I was a kid, this was all potato farms, and it took me probably a couple of decades for that, or maybe 1 decade for that to really sink in. And I started realizing that the place where I lived was changing really quickly, and that I didn't want to be like that guy and telling people when I was younger, this place looked much different. So I think that was the real inspiration for wanting to try and do something about it. And working as a carpenter on these homes, as you saw in the film, it just didn't feel right. It just felt like this incredibly gross, conspicuous consumption. And so when we started talking about it as a group, people got really angry really quickly. And, I had at some point had scenes in the film where there was interactions and scuffles with people, and kind of, it just, we decided we didn't want to really focus on all the anger. We wanted to focus on the action. And that was a big learning point for me too, was that to be more effective in these meetings, I had to actually share what I was feeling, of course, but really listen to the other side. And that's my opening comment, is when I listened to the other side, there was only really 3 reasons why people didn't want us to limit house size. People said, it's America, it's a free country. You can't tell me what to do with my property. I'm sure you've heard that in your town when you tried to put the historic district in. We heard property values. If I can't sell my house to the highest bidder, you've now hurt my ability to maximize my profits on my land. And then we heard jobs. What about jobs? If I have to get my kid through college, and if you tell me we can't build these extra large houses, then you're taking jobs away from me. And so that was really profound to understand that they only had 3 points, the other side. They didn't have 20 points. They had 3 points: free country, jobs, and property values. And so when we responded to those 3, it wasn't really that hard to debate them. It was, the free country is completely false. We have zoning regulations in most towns and cities in America. And then the part about property values was also erroneous. Since our bylaw has passed, the assessors and the real estate brokers tell us that the property values continue to go up in our town, and they feel it's because there's a sense that it's preserved. It's not going to be overbuilt. And so a lot of the brokers have thanked us for the bylaw. They think it's helped their business. And then the jobs thing is completely erroneous, because the jobs do not go away. People still build their summer houses here. They just can't build the big trophy homes. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for me as my, my opening comment, was that I really learned that listening was a way to kind of move forward, to really understand the other side. And I think what we see playing out in our country is what we saw playing out in my film on a smaller scale. And with that, I'm happy to pass the mic.
So, Thomas, this is Eric. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, I think we all benefited from the fact that in your transition from being an accountant to a carpenter, somewhere a filmmaker came in there as well. So can you tell us a little bit sort of about how you came to be a filmmaker, and sort of because this is the film is just such a good medium for explaining this. So a little bit of your film history.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't go to film school. I worked in Hollywood and LA as a production assistant for a little while. And then when I moved to the Vineyard, there was obviously no film industry here, but I loved it here. And so my friends and I started a film festival, and the Martha's Vineyard Film Festival. We just turned 20 this year. And so watching the documentaries over the years, that was my film education, was watching how a person could pick up a camera and really communicate their idea. And they didn't have to have a whole lot of training. They just had to have a lot of passion and a good story. And so the first day I picked up the camera and walked on a job site, the police came to my friend's house that night. We were in his truck, and they said, "You can't be doing that. The contractor's very upset with you." And we just to see the amount of anger that was kind of sparked after that first shoot made my friend and I realize, okay, we have something here, because everyone that we talked to on the island was talking about these big homes. but nobody was doing anything about it. Obviously I shouldn't say nobody. There are conservation organizations, there are towns with zoning bylaws, but in my small town, there was no limit. You could buy a piece of land and build as big a house as you wanted to. And that was happening, as you saw in the film. So film, why I played that Hamptons clip is because in a way that those simple visual images, when I went to the planning board meetings over a period of 16 months, there were people a lot smarter than me in those rooms and trained in law, lawyers and engineers. And I had none of that training, but I had pictures of the land before and after. And so I had a 3-ring binder, and they would kind of joke at the end of the 16 months, when's Thomas going to show his 3-ring binder? And every meeting I would get up because there was always someone new in the room. And when people saw the before and after, the beloved hillside or the beloved pond side, and then just 2 years later, it's gone, that really communicated to people. And that's why it's such a big part of my film with those Google Earth before and afters, because you can go to most towns in America where there's an overdevelopment issue and simply slide the calendar function back on Google Earth and see what that piece of land looked like 20 years ago. So, and then as far as me being in the film, I wasn't in it at first, and it became one of those, what they call talking heads documentaries in the industry, and people just talking with their opinions, and it was really hard to watch. And so when I put my own struggle in there, I think it became a better film, even though some people don't agree with that. For me, it's the kind of film I like watching when someone really bears their soul to you. And I wanted to make sure I did that.
Well, you know what?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Thomas, it really had a great effect to add that personal story in there. I have a question. When you first picked up your camera, what was your vision and how did it change over the years? I don't know if many people here know, but this was a 12-year journey for you. Yeah. And it must have evolved greatly.
Yeah, I think that word anger that I alluded to earlier, it wasn't just in those town meetings where people were angry. A lot of the people in the trades are angry, and they hide it from the customer, of course, because that's their livelihood. But a lot of people don't want to be building, they don't want to be doing this to their home. And so in the beginning, I was one of those guys. I was angry. I was really, really upset. I thought this was disgusting. People had 5 or 6 homes, their upstate New York home, their home in Aspen, their home in Florida, their home on the Vineyard, their home in Manhattan. And they were heated and empty, all like you saw in my film. And so it was anger. It was definitely anger in the beginning. And I'm going to show the world, but then, like I said, it was a maturation process, realizing that compared to most people in the world, I have so much, and anger wasn't getting me forward in the town meetings to get the bylaw passed. I had to really learn to mature a little bit and learn to listen and not just be angry and express my anger. But it was a good motivator.
Eric, did you have a question?
Thomas, at the beginning of the film, if you took a poll then, do you think that most people didn't see limiting square foot area as a priority, or in a town meeting, you would not have been able to get a majority and you had to bring people around slowly? That's
spoken by someone who's obviously had to go through that process. Absolutely. And, the man in the film, the retired fisherman, Chris Murphy, I actually called him on Father's Day, and, he's like a father figure to me. And he says he learns from me as I learn from him, but we've become very close over the years. And he really is the one that helped me see, don't lead from the front, lead from the rear, just bring people along quietly and really just, take your time, take a couple of years. Don't try and do this in 3 months. And so it wouldn't have passed. It would not have passed had we not done that work.
Right.
I mean, it's in the film, but it happens quickly. But it's worth mentioning again, the chair of the planning board is a very conservative woman, very kind woman named Janet Widener. And on day 1, she said, I don't think it's right for the government to tell you how big your house can be. I don't stand by this. And then you saw 16 months later, she said the entire planning board endorses this. And that was because of the 16 months of work of bringing people along and helping them see that, reasonable limits really don't have to be thought of as taking your freedom away. It's more the community consensus is we have a general scale. It's not saying you can't have a home. I think that would be taking your freedom away.
Now, Thomas, we have a question from one of our participants. Donald, are you there?
Yes. I was wondering if you had a working definition of what ownership was and how you explained this to the crowd and what their response was, because there seems to be a difference in what you're calling ownership and what the opposition was calling ownership. And I say this from a background of having read Thomas Paine's Agrarian Reform, which he really goes over in detail what it means to be living on a piece of property and your responsibility.
Oh, could you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think you might have more to say on the issue than I do. I'd love to hear that.
Well, what Paine said was, what was the condition of human beings before there was settlements? They were hunter-gatherer, and no one in the tribe, everyone was taken care of. There was no overly rich people, and there was no poor people. But once they decided not to hunt anymore and went into agriculture and raising of domestic animals, the change brought around a new set of rules. Mainly, he thought that no one should be worse off than the condition they had been before the change occurred. And that's what he promoted, that it is a community kind of set of rules that determines what piece of land you can, quotation marks, own. And we know over our long history, most of the ownership has come about through violence, not any legitimate kind of exchange of property. So I think it's important that people understand what it means to own a piece of property and what your responsibilities are. Not just, they don't just belong to you. You have a responsibility to the community you live in, and also to the environment that you are part of.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And what year did he surmise that this whole change happened?
200 years ago.
Of hunter-gatherer. Well, you know what my latest addiction is can you see those arrowheads? I found my first one like a year and a half ago, and my mind is blown. You know, they sometimes when they drain the ponds or they till a field after it rains, you can find them, and some of them are 6,000, 8,000 years old, and I can't believe that I'm finding stone tools that that were made before the pyramids were made. Right on the land where I live. And I'm sure if you went into the farmland where you live, you'd find them too. And so I think there's something to what you're saying. I'm glad you shared that. I agree with it 100%. I really do.
There's another question from Holly. What is the status of the Shiffer house now? The Shifter house?
That's still there. If you go to Google Earth and you go to the furthermost, the southeastern tip of the island on Chappaquiddick, you'll see it there from Google Earth very easily. But the sand is now building up there. So it's the most dynamic part of the island, and it changes, as you saw in the film, very rapidly. So right now the sand's coming back, and one could argue that the next time it retreats, it will retreat even more. But we really don't know. It's just very dynamic. And as Chris Murphy said, kind of a foolish place to build a house.
So you're saying the house is still there?
Still there, yep.
Oh, okay.
Because they moved it back. So as you saw in the film, they don't know how long they'll get, but they did move it back. I mean, yeah.
Now, Thomas, it was really striking to me when you interviewed that one woman who wasn't on camera about her new home. And it seemed to me there was a disconnect between her new home and what she thought her new home would be. Now, have you spoken more to people in the area who built these huge homes, and are they aware of what they're building? I mean, what's your sense? I don't think
they're aware. I think they're aware that they want what they want, but the architect in my film, Peter Breeze, when he saw the film, he made a public statement that he will change how he consults his clients, that he really had no idea until he saw the film put together. When I said, would you be interviewed for this documentary on home and house size? And he said he had no idea kind of what would come together. When he saw the thesis in the film, he understood it. And he said, we're part of a small community. We have to think about what we build and how we build it and what our neighbors are going to look at. And so I think it's an awareness thing, right? Like I know a woman on the island who moved here after a successful career, you know, bought a house on the water, said, clear all those trees and bushes because I want to see the water. Now she's one of the most active, you know, stewards of the land, really. She's an activist now. And she said, I just didn't know that that was biodiversity, that was habitat for birds and bugs. And I just wanted my view of the ocean. No one had told me that. But once she, you know, neighbors told her that's a little bit much. And once she started learning, she now is a big fighter for the environment. And so I think with this house size thing, it's the same thing. You know, it was very awkward for me because I run a film festival in Martha's Vineyard. I founded it 20 years ago, like I said. And so a lot of these people, you know, are patrons of the arts. And so when they see me, it is awkward. But I chose to, you know, I lost board members over this film, and I definitely lost some people's donations. But it's one of those things that I think we actually, my organization and myself, gathered more support. And so I did lose some support, but I think a lot of people were grateful that someone was actually just sticking their nose out and sticking their neck out, you know, and making it happen. So I think when people see the film, they're one step closer to understanding why they might not need so big of a house.
Yeah.
Awareness is my short answer. I don't think they're aware when they do it.
Yeah, I got that sense. And that's one of the reveals that was quite striking for me when I watched the film, because I think even seeing your younger self in that film, you wanted to go in there and you wanted to see this monster. You wanted to see someone who wasn't who you had imagined. And so that was it really helped to kind of bridge the gap, I think.
Yeah.
In the conversation.
I mean, did you catch when I pulled up into my driveway and the filmmaker was the same woman who had shot the interview with the woman who wouldn't be on camera, but she said, you know, how big is your house? And I was like, well, I thought it was going to be, but then it, you know, and I was like, oh my God, I just said the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to tell you that was definitely, you wouldn't think it would be hard, but for a sensitive being who's thinking about these things, it was actually hard. Like, why do I need so much space? I thought I didn't need this. But anyway, so I think it's a lot of us go through that, right? In our own homes, in our own apartments and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question about whether, first of all, I guess, are you still in that house? Someone that is asking.
Yeah. This is the house. I can show you now that it's lived in, I can show it to you. It's, there's Stevie. In the flesh, you see Steve?
Oh yes, your mascot.
So this is the house. We wanted it to be like a barn, and it still is. It's just got jigsaw puzzles and stuff in it now, you know.
Oh yeah, the jigsaw puzzle. I'm horrible at jigsaw puzzles.
And now we have a trophy coop. We have a chicken coop there.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of people? Do you feel a lot of people move to Martha's Vineyard, someone asked, as a way to escape the rat race?
Oh, it's happening now with COVID, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how I watched your TED Talk too, Thomas, and you mentioned how your original inspiration was your time in Hawaii. And it's funny because I watched your TED Talk after I watched your film. And this whole time, my fiance and I were watching One Big Home, because we have a very special, I mean, so many people have a special connection to Hawaii, but Hawaii is one of our favorite places. And when we were watching your film at first, we said, wow, this is like Hawaii. This is like Hawaii.
Yeah.
And
it is. It has that same kind of draw. There's, one of my friends lives in Hawaii. When he comes surfing here, he says you can feel the mana in the water, the spirit, you can feel it here. Yeah. But I think, honestly, it's probably any place that hasn't been overdeveloped, where you can be in touch with nature and you can actually hear the birds and see the stars at night. I think it might be that. I don't know. Maybe Hawaii and the Vineyard are really special places too.
Yeah. So Ron Gordon has a question. Have there been any pieces of land that would have had one big home instead of now 3, 4, or 5 smaller homes?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the conservationists don't mind the really wealthy people buying up the big plots of land because they're only going to put one home there. Whereas if we made it more affordable, we'd have a lot more pressure on the aquifer and on our resources, and we'd be, putting the environment in more risk. Actually, that's the irony.
Yeah.
There was an old woman that was almost in the film, but we had decided not to put her in. But that was her big takeaway, was that I'm on the side of the plants and animals. So if someone wants to buy 40 acres and put one trophy home up, that's better for me than a 40 lot subdivision. So it's complicated, right? It's really complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But no, the lots that are going to have trophy homes usually are right on the water, and so they don't subdivide those lots. They try and get someone to put a big house there. I'm generalizing.
Okay.
And Thomas, have any other towns on Martha's Vineyard taken up or changed their rules after Chilmark changed theirs?
Good question. The town of Aquina has even stricter zoning. Every house over 2,500 square foot needs a special permit. So a lot of the contractors can't stand building up there because they have to jump through hoops. And then the neighboring town, West Tisbury, they have had many meetings, and they say they want to do their own big house bylaw, but it hasn't happened yet. And then Edgartown and Oak Bluffs, I don't think they'll ever have one. And Tisbury, a few people are talking about. So no one's adopted it yet, but other towns in the country have. I flew to Hawaii and was really working with those people there that testified at the Honolulu City Council. They have a law they call monster homes. The town of Truro on Cape Cod took our template for our bylaw and basically just, changed it to suit their needs. And they passed their big house bylaw a couple of years ago. So people are doing it. As you know, in your town, when I read your guidelines, right, I thought they were so impressive.
Kim, is it possible for you to unmute Doug Shotland, who was on the zoning board in Pennington? And
sure.
I'd actually like to ask him about the passage of the square foot limit, which he knows he's more familiar with than I am.
Sure thing. Okay, I just requested Doug. Are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, Doug.
Welcome. Hello.
Hi. Thanks.
So, Doug, in Pennington, the historic preservation ordinance sort of had a lot of public interaction, but in fact, the passage of the square foot limitations for both the R80 and the R100 zones actually did not, and passed kind of quietly. Could you talk about a little bit about sort of how that happened and whether there's been any pushback and sort of what's happened at the zoning commission over that change?
The limit of the square footage limit for those two districts?
Yes. Yeah.
I think I was on the board when that happened. Do you know when that was?
I know that Tom, remind me Tom's last name.
Ogren?
He was behind that, so it was several years ago.
Well, we haven't heard much grumbling about it. That's for sure. I think people generally accept it because we know from our own experience as architects that 3,400, I think it's 3,500, 1,000 square feet in
3,500 and 4,000 for the R80.
They're pretty big houses, so you can get a decent sized house. There are a few houses that were built way before that are bigger, and they're real outliers. So I don't have a lot of grumbling about it.
Yeah, and I think the difference here again is because Pennington is an old town, built out already. Lots are relatively small, so you're not dealing with gigantic lots. So in fact, the large house issue by itself is really not as much of an issue in Pennington because there just physically isn't room on these lots to build gigantic houses.
Right. And I think people also want to live in a town like Pennington because they like that feel where the houses are modestly scaled and there's some consistency from one lot to the next.
Right.
How big is your historic district?
The whole town has 2,500 people, right? And the R80 is about half the town, and the R100 district is the other half. And the R100 is sort of a more suburban kind of zoning, where the R80 is more of an in-town, sort of an older in-town kind of zoning. Mm-hmm. And then, typically here, those size requirements are limited by maximum square footage, but then also by a floor area requirement, where a house can only, on every lot in town, you can't build a house that's 3,500 square feet. In fact, on a smaller lot, you're limited by the floor area ratio, which means that you can only build a house that's a certain percentage of the size of your lot.
Right.
So that's an additional limit on the size of the house. Any other questions come in, Kim?
I have quite a doozy of a comment question, so I'm going to read it.
Go ahead.
So this is from Sean. I am deeply inspired by how you've bravely told the story from your own personal emotional journey. Despite your noblest attempts, you reached a tipping point where you started to identify with the very same people who would demolish historic homes in order to rebuild a dream home, albeit on a lesser scale. How does one reconcile our own guilt of being a fellow human being with our own wants and needs with the greater good of the entire community, especially when others' jobs are at stake? And what advice would you give others who are passionate about spearheading a project for social or environmental change and facing similar challenges?
Okay, love this question, first of all. And I'll do my best to keep it brief. And I'll do the first one, which was the guilt part. So there was a moment before that historic house came down. Okay, this was a roadside house. You saw it. It was gorgeous. And our neighbors, the Dunkels, you know, the two brothers who get out of their truck and their van and come into the house, they're refugees, and they've lived in America their whole life. Two brothers and a sister, never got married, never had kids. They just have lived together like a little unit, and salt of the earth guys and women. And when they came in and they saw the amount of damage to the house, and they said, you know, I mean, you really can't save it as a house. And then we called people who said you could save it, and the price tag was ridiculous. So I started thinking, okay, that helped with my guilt. But there was one conversation with a historic home. I'm sure every town has a historic home nut, right? Someone who's really, really, really. So this person came in, and I use that term as a good nut. Right? You know, I'm the big house guy. But she came in and she saw these two trees in front of the house. They're probably 80 feet tall. And she said, you got to take those down because they're blocking the sight lines of the house. And I said, oh, but they're beautiful. And she said, yes, but they're blocking the house. And yet she was so passionate about saving this little bits of crown molding, not crown molding, sorry, right above the wainscoting. And because it was made with a hand plane, she just like, that was for her. You had to do everything you could to save that. And I realized in that moment, everyone has an opinion. And everyone has an opinion and they think they're right. But for her, cutting down those two trees meant nothing. To me, that was like anathema, you know, to take down two trees to show the house. And so those two things helped me. The salt of the earth people saying, you can't save this. And then the woman saying, you know, you cut those trees down. And then as far as what advice I would give to someone spearheading a movement, I opened up with the anger thing. That, you know, there was one meeting when we were all red-faced and the veins bulging out of our neck, you know, and the maintenance man followed me out. The guy who's in the film, Rodney, the custodian.
Yeah.
He followed me out into the parking lot, and he's a notorious kind of hothead in town. And he said, and he told me, listen, you got to lose the anger, because when you get angry, people stop listening to you. So here's like the hottest head in town telling me to lose the anger. So I would say to anyone spearheading a movement, like really take the anger to your friends and share it with your cohorts. But in these public meetings and when talking to the people who disagree with you, just remain calm and listen to them. That really helped me.
Good advice. Thank you so much. And I think it's very relevant today.
Yes.
Very relevant today.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sean, for your question. Holly wants to know if you have a current project that you're working on.
Yeah, the film festival is probably happening in Pennington. You can't go to movies anymore. You can't go to cinemas. So we're doing a drive-in 4 nights of the week here. And we have another program called Inwards, where we have people come together, 10 people, and we take on different topics. So this week we're taking on power. And you just share what you're feeling about that topic. And we have it moderated by a guy who was a former monk. And so, you know, you meditate at the open, and then you share really, you know, very personal things and all around this topic. So we make the room diverse culturally and on gender and age. And we're really trying, my whole kind of like life's work is discussion and debate, thoughtful discussion and debate. So the film festival that I founded, that's a bulk of our work. And we're trying to find a piece of land to build a barn. And if you Google Thomas Bena or MVFF, Martha's Vineyard Film Festival, buys land, you'll see our last attempt 4 years ago, and the neighbors like, you know, you're the big house guy and now you want to build a barn for movies, you know, people were very upset. So, you know, live by the sword and die by the sword. But that's the big project, to try and find a barn to gather the community and have film education, lectures, meditations, film screenings, but basically a community gathering space.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Any other comments from anyone in the audience? Any other questions?
Nothing's out of bounds, by the way. You can ask me anything.
Someone wanted to know how old Emma is now. And
You
she
know-
was a consultant. You had her listed as a consultant.
Yeah, and, you know, and that's not just dad being dad. My daughter is one of these, you know, she's one of these people that just, she sees things and she makes connections. And so she and her friends made 3 towns on the vineyard, the first 3 towns in America, to limit the sale, to ban the sale of plastic water and soda bottles, less than 32 ounces. So other towns have banned plastic water bottles, but these 6th graders, they banned plastic water and soda bottles in 4 towns now. And I've made videos of her doing that. So that's what I've done with her, but she's 11, she'll be 12 in August.
Wow. Following in daddy's footsteps.
Yeah, no, she's leading daddy now.
You know, I wonder if I might share the Pennington Zoning Map, just so that people are aware, sort of, you know, people, I think in a lot of cases, people in Pennington don't actually know sort of what controls we have, and that the zoning board and the Historic Preservation Commission actually have really struggled, I think, to find a good balance, which is just what Thomas was talking about the, you know, the right kind of balance for the thing that's right for this town, of, you know, regulation, understanding that people are afraid of regulation, but that there are certain limits of regulation that really benefit a town, and that we have some of that in place here. And I don't always know that people are aware of what we have. Okay, so actually, to start, here is Chilmark. Actually, the first slide is actually of Chilmark. And Thomas, do you want to talk a little bit about zoning controls in Chilmark?
Well, you know, I was interested to see all these kind of for some reason why they divided it up like that, but the whole town is zoned ag residential. So there's no commercial zoning in Chilmark. We do have one general store and we have a bank, but there's like one tiny, I guess, one really corner that has commercial buildings. But other than that, it's all ag residential. So I'm not quite sure why they color coded it as maybe just to kind of break the town up and have, you know, numbers to it, but it's all ag residential.
Mm-hmm.
There's no historic district. There's a roadside district. So any house on the roadside, you know, you can't take down if it's historic. Although you saw me, we were the precedent to be able to take one of those down.
Okay, and
that's the Zoya house that was featured.
Zoya house. And I mean, you can really see in terms of context, you know, this small house on the left of the slide, you know, sort of a, I mean, that's a generous sized house by most people's standards. And it's just totally dwarfed by the Zoya house.
Well, let's look at that for 1 second, because you see the house just to the northeast of the Zoya house. You can barely see just the rooftop with one chimney.
Mm-hmm.
That's a guest house. And
I'm sorry, I'll point to it. Wait,
yes,
this house?
That's a guest house. And now keep moving your cursor to the right. That's the main house.
Uh-huh.
So those people were very upset by the Zoyas, but you can see there's not much difference in size, really. The Zoyas just ramped it up a little bit, but it's the house just below the main house. See the garage with the solar panels? Now just go up there a little bit more to that house. So that's a local woman, and she probably got hammered the most. I mean, she's now surrounded by large seasonal homes, and that was a year-round local person.
Is the Zoya house still there then?
The Zoya house is still there. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can see this house then.
That's right.
That's that woman that you're talking about. And she's surrounded by a big property to the top, and then Zoya's to the bottom.
Yeah.
So here's a Pennington zoning map. To everyone in Pennington, this looks familiar. The yellow is the R80 zone. And in an R80 zone now, the largest house that you're allowed to build new is 3,500 square feet, or if you're adding on, which is really more common since most lots are already built on, your addition plus the existing is limited to 3,500.
Is
And
that footprint or is that square footage in total?
it's a floor area,
Okay,
not just footprint, but floor area.
great. Yeah.
And then the more flesh color here is the R100 zone, which is a more suburban kind of zoning. The lots are larger, houses a little farther apart, set farther back from the street. More 60s and 70s houses here, where the rest of the town is, mid 19th century through early 20th century. And in the R100 zone, houses can be 4,000 square feet. This is right out of the zoning code. In the R80 zone, size of houses limited both by floor area ratio and by not being allowed to exceed 3,500 square feet, and a couple of examples of what that means. And then last slide here is the historic district, which is a small area within the R80 zone, and the intention again of the historic district ordinance, written very carefully, is to discourage demolition of historic houses, but not really, and actually encouraging additions to those houses, so that rather than those old houses which are close to the street, anything that's added on in town generally needs a variance, which then comes in front of Doug Shotland's board there. But the idea is that the old dwelling close to the street front should remain, and that additions are added to the backs of those houses, so that there's the main streetscape character is retained. And so that's sort of where Pennington is in terms of house size, additions, and trying to hold on to the historic character of houses in town.
I think you should have made the film. That's really impressive. It really is impressive.
So, and I have to say that it's working pretty well. When the historic preservation ordinance came up for a vote, it passed by only one vote. And we were fortunate there. Had it come to a tie, the mayor had already said that if this comes up, I'm not in favor of additional regulations. So if it comes to a tiebreaker, I'll vote against it. He came back years later and said, the historic preservation ordinance here has been a complete success. And if I voted on it today, I would absolutely vote in favor of it. It was a mistake to say that I would vote against it at the time.
That's great.
Thank you for sharing, Eric.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Eric?
Kim, I do. This is Tara. I was wondering, the Zoya's house, they had the part about that 2,300 or 2,000 square foot detached bedroom with the indoor lap pool.
That's this piece, right?
What was that really for?
What do you mean?
Was it really just a bedroom?
Yeah, so they just, we had a thing in Chilmark that guest houses could only be 800 square feet, but there was a loophole that I'm sure their lawyer or architect found, that detached bedrooms had no limit. So, and a detached bedroom can have everything a guest house can except a kitchen. So, yeah, they skirted zoning. So at the town meeting, we didn't put it in the film, but we also passed a limit on detached bedrooms to 400 feet at the same meeting.
Amazing. Do the Zoyas still live there?
They summer there. Yeah, they come in the summertime.
They still do, because it seems like they would be very disliked, I would think, after that.
Well, Chris Murphy, the retired fisherman in the film that I mentioned earlier, he talks about this phenomenon. It didn't make it into the film, but he talks about how, even just in his lifetime, when wealthy people would come in the summer, they wanted to know the local people. They wanted to know, they wanted to go lobstering with him. They wanted to, with his dad or something. They wanted to really be part of the community. And now something has changed. And someone just mentioned this to me yesterday, that the wealthy people, and I'm not trying to be a classist here, but the wealthy seasonal residents who are building these big homes, they invite the same people to their house that have the other big homes. And so they create this subculture here that doesn't really care to know the lobsterman or the local artist. And so they've been vilified by some, absolutely. And in their circle, it's just, water off a duck's back. They're just,
One of the things I was thinking about
Hey, Tara, I think you
with this
cut out a
house
bit.
in Pennington. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we bought this house, we really didn't like the house. It's very small. It's built in 1926. It's really small and very, very small bedrooms. And, but we sat down and said, but we're buying so we decided to move here because really growing out of during this COVID time with my two older sons back. But it is about the community here. I think same for Eric and most people
Absolutely.
live in Pennington.
Yeah. Same for all the people who live in Pennington in very small houses. Thomas, my own house is like 1,300 square feet. And it works, you know.
Yeah.
Eric, I think we have some questions for you from Rose. Is there any height restriction on houses?
There is a height restriction of 35 feet, which is kind of a standard zoning height restriction pretty much through most of New Jersey. And that's sort of consistent with building code for fire safety and things like that. You know, and it's not a problem because sometimes older houses tend to be a little taller. You know, some of the houses in town are 3 stories. So the height restriction that is in the zoning code is actually not an issue. It's not a problem.
Okay. And Corrine wants to know, were the houses built along Curtis Lake built before these zoning restrictions?
I think that the ones on Curtis Lake are actually in the township. I think they're not in Pennington Borough. They're beyond the borough borders.
Okay, that explains it. I think for those of you who couldn't hear Tara completely, I think she was just expressing that for her, Pennington is about the community more than just the home they bought in the community.
And back to the Curtis Lake, though, there are some parts of the borough that have some very large houses that clearly preceded the zoning limitation on house size.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I have a question for Thomas. How has your life changed following the release of this documentary? And are there other documentaries in the works with your signature style?
Oh, that's funny. My life has changed. I tell people said, you know, did you make a lot of enemies? And my answer is I made some enemies, but I made many more friends doing this. And so right now my activism has kind of come to bite me in the behind as I try and raise money for the film festival and expand my circle. People still have opinions about the big house film, but it's okay because I always like the kind of surly waitress, the person who's just tells you what they're feeling and they're not worried about hurting your feelings. They think of you as a grown up and you can take it. And so this film kind of put me on that map. You know, I think I'm not from here. I'm from away, as they say, you know, and so people who aren't from here often kind of maybe don't take as big an ownership role in the place and have a voice because they don't feel like but Chris Murphy, again, the retired fisherman, said, you love this place, you work here, you run a company here. Don't you ever quiet your voice because you think you shouldn't. You live here and you get to call this place home. And so you get to have a voice. And even people who don't live here can have a voice. No one should be quiet, you know. So I think my life has changed because I'm not afraid to have people not like me, even though when I express something that I believe in. That's been a big change for me. Still hurts sometimes, you know, to have people not like me because but yeah, and other projects, this barn project I want to build, that's the one that I really want to focus on.
Sounds good.
So one of the things that's interesting in your film is to sort of see a little bit more about how the town meeting works, because that's a New England institution that we don't have here.
Oh.
And you know, so here it works very differently, where the town council makes those decisions. There are various boards in town who make kinds of decisions, but there really isn't sort of a town meeting. So I loved seeing the town meeting in operation.
Yeah, that's a really powerful form of government. Everyone has a voice, literally.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a question about, I guess it's from Tara, as a librarian. Do you know Geraldine Brooks? She noticed in your credits.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. Yes, Geraldine comes to our films, and at the film festival, we have bales of hay and we have long pine tables that people sit at, and she always comes and gets the bales of hay for her animals after the film festival's over. She buys them from us.
It's great.
Lovely, lovely woman.
It was so
Love
neat.
her books.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was so neat also seeing you interview Doug Lyman. I'm a huge Born Identity fan.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, wow,
Well, he seems like the kind of guy who gets it, who moves to Martha's Vineyard and really gets what Martha's Vineyard is.
That's right.
And doesn't bring his other home to Martha's Vineyard, but comes to Martha's Vineyard to be there.
It was so powerful to hear him describe being raised in the Hamptons with the tennis court and with the behind big hedges. And then it's one of those things about the experience, the awareness thing. Once he became aware of what community can be, he didn't want to go back to the other way, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah. We have a comment from Kathleen. Kathleen says, I grew up in Massachusetts and always attended town meetings. What I loved about Thomas's film was its firm belief in democracy.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's very inspirational to see the change happen, but to see the communication with everyone.
Yeah, and I don't want to gloss over something that I said earlier, which is that at all these meetings, I was often surrounded by people a lot smarter than I am, but I've realized and one of my favorite filmmakers told me this once, we all have different types of intelligence. He said, yours is rooted in some kind of a simple kind of way of communicating things. And, it's don't undervalue that. And I have to say, watching this whole process and people told me, this wouldn't have happened without you. Like you were the one driving it. And that was powerful to realize that, I don't have to be an engineer. I don't have to have gone to the right schools. I can just really love something and speak about it passionately and roll my sleeves up and make change happen. That was powerful to learn.
Wow. Any other comments from everyone? It's very powerful to watch, I have to say. Very inspirational. And I think a lot of people are commenting now about how inspired they were to watch it. So thank you so much. And thank you for taking your time. We were so surprised. We're a small library, and usually when we ask for people to come speak, usually we get some agent on the phone or or some fee at least. And Thomas, you were generous enough to just come here on your own time to speak with us, and it means so much.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm honored to be here. We were actually at the beach, and my friend said, "I thought you have a Zoom call at 3." I said, "Oh my God, right." But I'm glad I made it. I really do feel honored. I mean, it's been, 12 years making the film, 3 years traveling around America with it. It played at the National Gallery of Art in DC, the National Building Museum. So I had so many beautiful, wonderful public screenings. And then this is, now I'm doing this kind of online thing. So we're in our, it'll be 4 years in April, which is pretty amazing. And as someone who runs a film festival, I can tell you a lot of films don't last that long. So I think it's triggering something that a lot of us feel, this desire to maintain our place.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the country is really full of these kinds of great places. And I think more and more people appreciate that it takes some effort to protect them.
Yeah. I mean, I really do hope, I hope as a nation we can come together. I just want to say that while we're all together on this call. I'm so kind of I don't want to say heartbroken, that's too strong, but close to heartbroken what's happening right now.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I feel hope regardless of everything. I mean, it's films like One Big Home, Thomas, that really show that people can come together and that there is hope.
Yeah, right. I mean, the thing is, if we had, you remember that small scene in the library where we were all talking about house size, and if we had tried to push through 2,500 feet, it wouldn't have passed.
Right.
And so that compromise of going up, that was a big lesson too, life lesson. Just, give a little and get a little. Don't try and just get it your way. That was very powerful. And of the people that voted no, many people told me that they heard that people voted no because the limit was too low still. They wanted the limit to be 5,000 square feet. If it could be 5,000, well, you saw the man in the film, Frank LaRusso, the builder, the whitehead man. He said, if it can be 5,000, I'll vote for it. This is too, and I'm not voting for it at 3,500. So that was interesting. So the basic.
I was actually surprised at the film that it passed when I saw 3,500. I was anticipating that 5,000 was going to be passed.
Yeah, and in truth, you still can build 5,000 with a special permit, and the more land you have, we didn't want to put all this in the film. I'm sure you're ready for the film to be over after an hour and a half, but it's a sliding scale. So the more land you have, you get another 500 square foot per acre. So one of the largest homes in Chilmark was just built 3 years ago because the woman owned 42 acres. And so she built a really big house. But that's a compromise. That was part of the compromise.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So before we go, I just wanted to let everyone know we have one last film for the summer that we're showing starting the end of next month. And it's a documentary called Catching Sight of Thelma and Louise. And it explores the same people's reactions to the film Thelma and Louise from 25 years ago and then today. So sort of the time span and people's opinions about the film. And this film will be available to stream starting Sunday, July 19th through Sunday, July 26th. And then we'll have a post-film Zoom discussion on Sunday, July 26th at 3 p.m. And also, I know many of you are really interested in art programs. So on Sunday, July 12th, at 3 p.m. via Zoom, we're having an arts educator, Janet Mandel, speak about Pierre-Auguste Renoir. And he's one of my favorite artists. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And you can sign up for all of our programs on penningtonlibrary.org. And of course, we always welcome any feedback that you may have. So I am going to copy and paste in the chat window the survey link so you can give us suggestions, feedback on today's conversation and One Big Home. I don't know, I guess you were on the beach, Thomas, so it must be beautiful outside where you are right now. And It's very sunny here. Every Sunday that we've been doing these programs, it's been sunny and beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm always surprised that people are still showing up. But then I always encourage people to go outside and get some sunlight.
Yeah.
Afterward. So that's what I think I'm going to do now. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Sunday afternoon. I'm so pleased that everyone showed up, and I'm so pleased to have this conversation with you, Thomas. Thank you again. And Eric, too, for joining us. Thank you again.
Nice to meet you all.
Yes, have a wonderful Sunday.